Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today, we're going to talk about our eyes. So in one of our recent segments, we learned about LASIK surgery as well as different types of vision issues. I want to explore that a little bit more, as I find myself in the market for new glasses, and I have no idea what this paperwork is really saying to me. So I wanted to look into it with you guys, and we could all learn about it together. So today, we're going to talk about different types of eye issues and how to read our eyeglass prescriptions, so we know what all of those abbreviations and pluses and minuses truly mean. If you're anything like me, you very well may not know your actual eyeglasses prescription because it is just a bunch of numbers on the page. So I'm hoping that by contextualizing it in learning what these things mean, I will actually be able to memorize this a little bit easier. At least that's how it generally works for me. What I can understand and really wrap my brain around is something that I am more likely to remember than just remembering something through rote memorization. So, first up, we are going to talk about the different types of eye conditions that may lead one to needing to wear glasses. So first up, we're going to talk about the most common types that folks are familiar with: nearsightedness, farsightedness, and astigmatism. So with nearsightedness, this one is also referred to as myopia, and it's a fairly common condition in which the light that is coming into the eye doesn't get focused properly on the retina, and that makes it difficult for the person who has it to see objects that are far away. And as we discussed in our episode on lasers, that condition is generally caused by your eyeball being a little bit too long. So that is a result of the cornea being a little bit wonky in its lens shape. It's a little bit elongated. In farsightedness, on the other hand, it's called hyperopia, and it's caused by a shortening of the eyeball. So your cornea is shaped a little bit flatter than it should be, and that is causing the rays of light to also not be focused properly on your retina and make it difficult for you to see things that are up close. With astigmatism, that is your cornea being wonky shaped. So the other two are also them being wonky shaped, but one of them was being really long and the other one was like being flatter, like more conical and more flat. With astigmatism, think of it as being like rolling hills, perhaps. It's quite irregular in shape, but it's neither simply too long or too short. It's kind of wavy, perhaps, and it could look a variety of different ways. But it results in getting blurred images in otherwise clear areas. So it also results in an imperfect focusing of light onto your retina. So regardless of the shape of your cornea, it could result in an eyesight issue that is going to have blurred vision. It just depends on the particular shape of the wonkiness, whether that is up close, far away, or a little bit of both. You can also get astigmatism alongside myopia or hyperopia, and they refer to these conditions as refractive errors because the light isn't refracting properly onto the retina. So with your diagnosis, normally a doctor will measure your vision loss with something called the Snellen test chart. So yes, I am talking about that big old chart that usually starts with a giant E at the top, and then each row below it in that pyramid shape or square shape tends to be smaller and smaller. In recent years, some doctors have also swapped over to a new chart referred to as the LogMAR chart. So L-O-G, all in lowercase, and capital M-A-R. And this is referring to a new method for measuring your visual acuity. The Snellen chart was created in 1862. We've been using it since then. And then more recently, the LogMAR chart. So the Snellen chart is the one you're thinking of that has like the giant E or the giant A at the top, and it progressively gets smaller as it kind of builds a pyramid base towards the bottom and almost turns rectangular. Whereas the LogMAR chart starts with that row of large letters at the top, and they gradually get smaller as we go to the peak of that triangle. So it's kind of inverted almost. The LogMAR chart is also often used for kids especially, because testing the visual acuity of children can be very challenging. So most of these new charts have found that LogMAR works best. They also tend to use it in clinical applications for looking at age-related macular degeneration, ARMD. And we're going to talk some more about macular degeneration in our next segment. So when they use these, they use LogMAR acuities because that's what the research used. And so that makes it easier to use the LogMAR acuity measurements in their practices rather than trying to translate that between LogMAR and Snellen, because we don't have a direct correlation between LogMAR and Snellen in order to really figure out which one is equivalent to which. There is no direct comparison. So that can cause a lot of difficulty during translation of these prescriptions. And sometimes some clinics use Snellen and others use LogMAR. So it's not really intuitive, as poor vision is recorded as a high number in Snellen, and in LogMAR it is a lower number. So in Snellen, that is like 6 out of 60, and then LogMAR would be 1.00. And for Snellen, it being better vision is going to be 6 out of 6, and for LogMAR, 0.00. So you can see that it might be a little bit wonky in translating these types of mathematical figures back and forth between the two. Most ARMD clinics, though, that age-related macular degeneration clinics, those use the LogMAR method in trying to use that notation. So if your eyesight is more related to macular degeneration in your issues, then you very likely are already using LogMAR. But you can also ask your doctor about it if you are curious like I am. You can also Google these different charts. That's LogMAR, L-O-G-M-A-R, and Snellen, S-N-E-L-L-E-N. There is a rough conversion table that you can also Google for LogMAR versus Snellen. And for example, we talked about the vision being 1.0 to 6/60 for LogMAR versus Snellen, but then it gets kind of wonky. So, it's already a little bit wonky. But after that, 0.9 for logmar is equivalent to 6/48 for Snellen. And then for 0.8, it's 6/38. And then for 0.7, 6/30. So you see that at first it went down by 28, and then by 10, and then by 8, and after that it's going to go down by 6, and so on and so forth. So it's really quite strange, and it is a lot easier just to make sure we understand each of them and ask your doctor which one they're using if you have a preference. They're still going to be able to get you great glasses either way, but, I ask probably too many questions. Scientists are children who never grew up and stopped asking why. So if you are also curious about the world around you, go ahead and ask or give it a Google. That's the only way you're going to find out more. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about how to read those eyeglasses prescriptions. Stay tuned.
Are you looking to learn more about the latest trends from the fitness world? Are you confused by all the different trends that are out there? The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place for you. The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place to come for people of all skill and interest levels. Join us as we explore the latest trends in the fitness world. Does that new exercise really work? Should I try yoga? Whatever your question, chances are good you'll find an answer on the GSMC Fitness Podcast.
Farsightedness and astigmatism, as well as the differences between a Snellen chart and a logmar chart for measuring visual acuity. Now we're going to talk about how to read your eyeglass prescription. So if you guys are like me, every time you go to the eye doctor and they hand you that little piece of paper, you're just like, okay, I'm going to send this to the people who are going to make my glasses, and they'll definitely know what that means. But I have no idea what plus or minus or any of those numbers really mean. So we're going to figure that out together today. When you look at your eyeglasses prescription, you'll normally see numbers listed under letters like OS and OD. Now those are Latin abbreviations. OS means your left eye. It's short for oculus, meaning eye, sinister, meaning left. So that's your left eye. And OD is oculus dextrus, or your right eye. So turns out those are just telling you which eye is which. Interesting that the left is considered to be sinister. Sometimes though, you might see a notation that says OU instead. And that means you have something going on with both eyes, something that they have in common. In general though, if you're looking at the numbers, the further away you go from 0 on your prescription, that means the worse your eyesight is, and the more vision correction that you need. So you'll need a stronger prescription if you are further away from 0. So 0 is really our sectioning point. And we've discussed sectioning points in previous episodes as it relates to things like weighing cremains or telling what sex certain reptiles and herptiles are really going to be based on the temperature to which they're exposed about a third of the way through the embryonic process. So in this case, 0 is our sectioning point. And that means at 0, you have what is considered to be normal eyesight. If you have anything above 0 or under 0, then that means you have something wrong with your eyesight. So if you have a plus sign in front of your number, that means that you're farsighted. And if you have a minus sign, that means that you're nearsighted. So mine would be a minus sign in front of it. And then you have the numbers on there that really represent something referred to as a diopter. And the diopter is kind of like the same concept as newtons or things like that in physics that are used to measure different things. It's a unit of measurement that we're really using to refer to the correction or focusing power of your eyeglass lenses that your specific eyes require. A lot of times they will abbreviate diopter to be D, but that just means how much of a factor you need those lenses to focus for you. So if your prescription says minus 1.00, then you have 1 diopter of nearsightedness is how they would phrase that. And that's considered to be fairly mild. If you are at negative 4.25, that means you have 4 1/4 diopters of nearsightedness. And that's more nearsighted than that initial -1, and it does require stronger lenses. And stronger lenses typically means thicker lenses. Conversely, if you had plus 1.00, that would mean you're just a little bit farsighted and you don't need that much correction, and therefore you don't need super thick lenses. And then if you have plus 5, then that would mean you are quite farsighted and they need to go ahead and get you those stronger, thicker lenses for your glasses. So that's one reason why your glasses lenses may be thicker or thinner than your friends. Mine are relatively thin because I'm at about, I think it said negative 1.25 and negative 1.5. So that's my prescription, is roughly around there. I might be remembering that a little bit differently, but I know that it was a minus sign and that I am in fact nearsighted. I just have trouble seeing some things that are far away, like certain road signs. It takes me a little bit longer to be able to read them in proximity, or like in the grocery store. If I'm trying to read which things are in which aisles, it takes me a little bit to get closer to it than it might take someone else. But I'm not required to wear glasses while I drive or anything like that because I'm still able to make things out just fine. You know, within a safe distance. I'm able to make them out safely from far enough away. I still always wear my glasses while I drive though, because I like to be as safe as possible. If you have astigmatism though, you may have 3 numbers in your prescription. And the formula they use for writing that numbers is S by C by axis. The S is the spherical portion of your prescription. So that's telling you the degree of nearsightedness or farsightedness, like we discussed earlier. So -1 for mildly nearsighted, or +4 for pretty farsighted. Talking about the C is referring to the cylinder or the astigmatism specifically, and that can be a negative or a positive number. And it's really also measuring those diopters, the degree of astigmatism that you have in those units of measurement. So the bigger that number, the more astigmatism you have. Astigmatism is most often caused by your cornea being shaped more like a football than a basketball. The axis is going to be that last number, and it's anywhere between 0 and 180 degrees. It's telling you how your astigmatism is oriented. So we need to know with astigmatism not just how much there is, but where precisely that curvature difference is on your eyes. So, if for astigmatism, you might have a prescription that says something like -1.00 plus 1.50 x 180. And so that's telling you that the spherical portion is your degree of nearsightedness or farsightedness. So at -1, you would be mildly nearsighted. Then that plus 1.50, is going to be that degree of astigmatism you have as measured in diopters, that same measurement unit that we are using with that -1 to indicate mild astigmatism. Then we have by 180, that is your degree or the orientation of where the astigmatism curvature is on your eyes. So in that case, that means you have 1 diopter of nearsightedness, 1.5 diopters of astigmatism, and an axis of 180 degrees. Conversely, if this were to be measured with farsightedness, it may say something like plus 2.50 plus 3.00 x 45. And that would mean that you have 2.5 diopters of farsightedness, so you're just a little bit farsighted. And then you have 3 diopters of astigmatism and an axis of 45 degrees, or that location of the curvature is at 45 degrees. And that just makes sure that they're getting you the correct lens thickness, and they're keeping those lenses at the correct shape and thickness for you based on all of those elements. Now, you may not have the nearsightedness or the farsightedness with it. That is going to be sometimes a 0, perhaps, in your case. But you might have 0.00 plus 1.50 x 180, and that would be that you have otherwise normal vision, but your degree of astigmatism is going to be plus 1.50, and your x of 180 would be where that curvature is taking place on your eye. So all of these things really just work together to let your doctors know in this measurement of diopters precisely what your issues are, just by changing it to a really easy conversion rate. And that way they're able to all have the same measurements and all be on the same page, even if we just end up referring to it as being nearsighted or farsighted or having astigmatism. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about macular degeneration. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Prescription. We talked about the components of nearsightedness and farsightedness, which are denoted by the negative and plus signs in front of the numbers, as well as the numbers being anywhere from 0, meaning normal eyesight, to much larger numbers, like 6 or so, indicating that you have worse eyesight. So closer to 0 is good. The further from 0 means the stronger correction that your eyes need. We also talked about how to understand the prescription for the astigmatism issues and the importance of diopters, the unit of measurement that doctors use to help understand the focusing power of the specific lenses for your specific eyesight issues. Now we're going to talk about macular degeneration. So I did not really know much about macular degeneration before researching this for you guys, but it's the leading cause of vision loss in America. It affects more than 10 million United States Americans, and it's more so than cataracts and glaucoma when combined together. Right now, macular degeneration is still considered to be an incurable eye disease. And unlike the other types of issues like astigmatism and nearsightedness and farsightedness that we discussed that are really associated with the shape of the cornea, macular degeneration is instead caused by the central portion of your retina deteriorating. And your retina is that inside back layer of the eye that really is the screen that we are sending the images and the light that we see from outside that then translates them via the optic nerve from our eye to our brain. So it's kind of like our movie screen, sort of. The retina's central portion is called the macula, and it's responsible for focusing central vision in your eye. So that's related to controlling your ability to read, or drive a car, or recognize faces, recognize colors, and to see things in fine detail when you're looking at images or objects in everyday life. So in the back of your eye, if you're looking at the anatomy of an eye, then the cornea is going to be that little clear area that bulges out a little bit in front of your pupil and your iris. And then in the back of the eye, you're going to have the optic nerve. And in front of that, you'll see kind of like a darkened spot. And that is going to be your macula. If you think about the human eye like you would a camera, then the macula is going to be the central and sensitive area of the film. When it's working properly, your macula can collect some highly detailed images at the center of your vision and also send them up to the optic nerve to the brain, where your brain interprets those sensations and perceptions as being sight. But when the cells of your macula start deteriorating, those images are no longer received correctly. Early on in macular degeneration, it's not going to entirely affect your vision. But if the disease does progress, then you might start getting wavy or blurred vision. And if it continues to worsen after that, you could completely lose your central vision. Kind of like taking a permanent marker to the middle of a photo and starting to darken it out by drawing concentric circles that are getting larger and larger until the edges of those are also kind of blurry. Folks who have advanced macular degeneration are considered legally to be blind. But because the rest of their retina is working, they may still have working peripheral vision. Now that's not going to be as clear as central vision, and it is going to mean that things that are right in front of them are not going to be as easily perceived as things in their periphery. So that can cause a lot of problems if they were to try to drive and so on. But there are actually two types of macular degeneration. One type is referred to as being dry, and that's called atrophic. And the other type is referred to as wet, and that's exudative. So about 85 to 90% of the cases of macular degeneration are the dry atrophic type, and 10 to 15% are the wet or exudative type. You may also see a type referred to as Stargardt disease, and that is a form of macular degeneration that tends to be found in young people, and it's caused by a recessive gene. So what do we really mean by dry and wet macular degeneration? Well, the dry kind does not involve any leaking of blood or serum. So loss of vision may still occur, but you may still have good central vision. That means it may be 20/40 or better. but you may have some functional limitations, like your vision may fluctuate, or you may have trouble reading because you don't have the full area of your central vision available to you. Or your vision may be limited at night or under certain conditions, like if it's dim in a building. So, in my personal opinion, Olive Garden would be very dark. I don't have anything personally against their food, but every Olive Garden I've been in has seemed to be inordinately dark. Perhaps it's just me, but certain places that tend to be darker and have that reduced illumination for whatever reason, like a roller skating rink when they turn the lights off and they put the disco ball on and the laser lights and stuff onto the floor and turn on the fog machines and stuff. That could cause some problems for folks who have macular degeneration, or perhaps going to a movie theater or going out to a club or a bar, etc. Anywhere where the illumination is reduced could cause them some trouble in seeing. In the dry type of macular degeneration, the deterioration of the retina is generally associated with these little small yellow deposits forming. These are called drusen, and they form under the macula. And when you get these drusen, then they end up thinning and drying out the macula, and then it's no longer able to function properly. The amount of central vision loss is directly related to the location and the amount of retinal thinning caused by the drusen. So I keep throwing that word around. What is drusen? Well, they're just those little small yellow deposits that form under the macula. It can take months or even years for them to form. And they are teeny tiny, but they can also lead to cell death and therefore also a result of clear vision straight ahead at the center area of your vision instead of the periphery. A doctor can see those though during a dilated eye exam or by using retinal photography. So if you have more than a few small drusen, then they'll say that you have early age-related macular degeneration, or that AMD or ARMD, as we discussed in our first segments. So folks who have drusen may often not have any symptoms that are noticeable, but the existence of those deposits can be a risk for some degree of vision loss in the future. So your doctor can view these, and even if you are not currently experiencing symptoms, they can let you know to watch out for it. The only way to really find these, though, is if you have a thorough eye examination, because these little drusen, which means rocks or geodes in German, are just kind of like these tiny pebbles of debris under your retina, but they're not at the front of your eye, so you can't see them just by looking at them without getting that thorough eye examination with that dilation or retinal photography. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk some more about these drusen and then dive into wet macular degeneration. Stay tuned.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Discussing macular degeneration, how it works in losing your focusing central vision in your eye while still maintaining components of your periphery, and that there are two different types, dry and wet, with most of the cases, almost 90%, being the dry atrophic type, and the 10 to 15 being that wet exudative type. So with the dry type that are typically caused by those drusen, the German word for rock or geode, they're these little yellow pebble-like substances that accumulate under the retina and the macula, and then that can be a big problem for your eyes. So as these deposit there, it's generally the result of a garbage disposal problem. So your retinal cells dump unwanted material, and like we discussed in our episode on the immune system, normally your immune cells can clean most of that stuff up. But if your retina are dumping too much, or it's not properly packaged for disposal, or the immune cells don't function correctly, then it can pile up. So, kind of like not properly packaging your trash before you put it out for disposal. If it's not in the bag correctly, or if you've just stuffed a bunch of garbage into a can instead of into a bag, the garbage man may not pick it up because it's not following along with the rules. Or if you put multiple bags out there, and the rule for your apartment complex or your community is that they'll only pick up one bag per day, then they may not go ahead and get all of it. And then it can effectively pile up, just like these drusen. And these drusen also contain proteins and lipids. Lipids are naturally occurring molecules that include fats, and so you can make things like goat's milk soap and all kinds of other stuff with lipids, and it helps your skin feel really nice sometimes, depending on the type. But some of those proteins are pro-inflammatory, and that means that the immune system coats the drusen. So one protein in the drusen is that beta amyloid. And you'll remember that we discussed beta amyloid when we discussed some issues related to the brain. Beta amyloid is that harmful deposit that builds up in your brain, especially found in the brains of people who have Alzheimer's disease. And they think that this beta amyloid protein may be contributing to both Alzheimer's disease and to macular degeneration. But just because you have macular degeneration doesn't mean that you have a major risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease. The location of where the deposits are what really matters in that instance. So don't panic. Having AMD does not mean that you are at a major risk for developing Alzheimer's. Just that beta amyloid deposits may be causative in both diseases. When it comes to determining the risk of future vision loss in macular degeneration, that is related to the number and size of those drusen. The more you have and the larger they are, the higher your risk. So if you have just a few small ones, then your risk isn't going to be as big. Drusen are generally categorized into 3 clusters of small, intermediate, and large. And that's important because the number is going to tell you exactly what your risk is, really. So it's going to be 20 or more intermediate drusen, or at least one large drus present in your eyes in order to really be beneficial for taking something like AREDS2 antioxidant vitamins. So lutein, vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, and copper. Those antioxidant vitamins can significantly reduce your risk of vision loss. So if you get that comprehensive eye exam and your doctor tells you that you have this size and number of drusen, then he may recommend that you go ahead and take certain antioxidant vitamins. At which point, if you're also on other medications, remember to talk to your primary care physician as well to see if there are any interactions between your new vitamins and supplements and any other types of pharmaceuticals you may be on. If you have drusen in there, it means that some central vision loss could occur in the future, And that could be from slowly progressing atrophy, which is just shrinking or withering of tissues. So you can get muscle atrophy. You can also get retinal atrophy. It just is referring to the part of the body that the atrophy is in. But the type with your central vision loss is generally referred to as being geographic atrophy. It could also be caused by the growth and leakage of new blood vessels rapidly being born. And that's called neovascularization. So that really just means new blood vessels. And that occurs in wet age-related macular degeneration. So what is wet age-related macular degeneration? Well, that's the other type. That 10 to 15% of other cases of macular degeneration are the wet or exudative type. So when we say wet, what we mean is that there are abnormal blood vessels, and these are called choroidal neovascularization, or CNVs, and they grow under your retina and your macula, and then they leak fluid, and they bleed. So they're leaking blood and serum into the surrounding area, and that can cause your macula to bulge out or lift up from the position it's normally in, which is flat, and that can distort your central vision or even destroy it. So it's really a buildup of fluids, and that's why it's referred to as being the wet type, whereas with the dry type, it's normally just an accumulation of these protein-coated drusen that are forming in your eye from where your immune system, for whatever reason, isn't clearing them out appropriately. So one is primarily caused by those little pebbles, the dry kind, and the wet kind is associated with fluid leakage of blood or serum, and that is just like filling a balloon, and it's distorting that central vision. So in the wet type, you may see a dark spot or spots in the center of your vision, and that's due to blood or other types of fluid under your macula. You may also look at lines, and they may look wavy when they're straight. And that's because the macula is no longer smooth, so it's distorting those straight lines into looking wavy. Your side or peripheral vision is rarely affected in these cases, and some patients don't notice any changes despite the onset of neovascularization. That's why it's important to periodically check your eyes for it to make sure that you're identified as being at risk if that is something that's a problem for you, because they're not going to know until they can check it or until it's already advanced. So if your doctor is asking you to dilate your eyes for your vision exam, it's generally going to be to check for things like drusen or fluid buildup in macular degeneration to assess your vulnerability and or risk for it. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the stages of macular degeneration as well as some risk factors, causes, and treatments. Stay tuned.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Macular degeneration. Now we're going to talk about some stages of it, what you can expect if you receive this diagnosis, as well as some causes, risk factors, and treatment outcomes. So for macular degeneration, you have 3 stages for the age-related type. The first is early AMD. So most folks don't experience any vision loss in the early stage because this is generally detected with regular eye exams. And if you have more than one risk factor, then it's really important that you go ahead and see a doctor. Those risk factors are going to be first and foremost age. So your age is going to increase your risk, and the disease is most likely to occur in folks who are 55 and older. Other risk factors include genetics. So if you have a family history of AMD, then you may be at a higher risk. Smoking doubles your risk of getting age-related macular degeneration. And Caucasians are more likely to develop the disease than African Americans or Hispanics or Latinos. So if any of those categories and those factors are true for you, and you have more than one of them that may be putting you at a greater risk for it, then talk to your doctor the next time you go in for an eye exam to examine your risk for this disease. Early AMD is generally diagnosed by the presence of those intermediate-sized drusen, those little yellow deposits beneath your retina. Intermediate AMD means that you may be experiencing some vision loss, but you still might not have any noticeable symptoms at that point. A comprehensive eye exam with some specific tests will help your doctor search out larger drusen and see any pigment changes in your retina. At the late stage, then the vision loss will have become noticeable. So if you have been losing vision in your central field of vision, speak to your doctor about it because they may need to talk to you about macular degeneration. There are both hereditary and environmental causes of macular degeneration. It's very complex in how it works, and scientists are still researching to understand what causes these cells to begin deteriorating. They're looking for a treatment breakthrough because as of yet, we don't really have one. They know that the causes for age-related macular degeneration are not the same as Stargardt disease. Stargardt disease, the type that affects younger individuals, has a specific genetic cause in most cases, but AMD tends to involve both genetic and environmental factors, such as smoking. So, a couple of doctors at the NIH have stated that macular degeneration will soon take on aspects of an epidemic as the baby boomers get older. As they age, in the absence of further prevention and treatment advances, they think that the prevalence of AMD is going to reach about 6.3 million Americans by the year 2030. So in a little less than 10 years, 6.3 million Americans may reach epidemic proportions of having age-related macular degeneration. That really means that 6.3 million people are going to have some type of variation in their ability to see directly in front of them. Their center field of vision is going to be impacted to some degree. It didn't state in those stats which type they were going to have, or which stage rather, whether it would be early, intermediate, or late, but the older that you are, the higher your risk is of developing it, especially if you are also Caucasian, or you have a family history of it, or if you are a smoker or have been a smoker. Right now, we don't have a known cure for macular degeneration, but there are some things that you can do to reduce your risk, and you may even be able to slow the progression following a diagnosis. So you can pursue lifestyle changes like dieting, exercising, avoiding smoking, and protecting your eyes from UV light. Now, we recently discussed light and lasers, so I wanted to touch on this too. Ultraviolet and blue light in particular can aggravate macular degeneration. So there are some harmful effects of the ultraviolet portion of the light. Ultraviolet light, or UV, is that spectrum of invisible light. So that means it's between 286 nanometers to 400 nanometers. We generally understand it to be harmful to the eye, and it could lead to cataracts and other types of eye diseases like AMD. Retinal damage is the number one hazard from light. There are 3 types of retinal damage: structural, thermal, and photochemical. And the type of damage you receive depends on the wavelength, the power level, and the exposure time. So a lot of times we think of UV light as being from the sun. That's our primary source of UV rays, right? And whenever you buy sunglasses or sunblock, it talks about UVA and UVB rays. But you can actually get this type of light from other sources. Anything from a tanning bed to a welder's flash or video display terminals, fluorescent lighting, which is a ton of industrial lighting, high-intensity mercury vapor lamps. Those are used for playing sports at night, or they can also be used in high crime areas, and xenon arc lamps. Now, I did have to Google xenon arc lamps when I was looking this up because I had no idea what they are. But it turns out that they are very similar in their light composition of natural sunlight. So it produces a really bright white light that's similar to natural sunlight. And it's used a lot in the film and daylight simulation industries. And these xenon arc lamps produce light by passing electricity through ionized xenon gas at really high pressures. So, turns out it can be bad for your eyes, but scientifically, it sounds really cool. But keep your eyes away from it. You want to make sure you're protecting your eyes from all sources of UV light, including the types that sound really scientifically cool. Now, you can divide UV light into 3 different segments, and those are usually referred to as being A, B, and C. And they are ordered from least harmful to most harmful to your eye. We don't hear much about UVC because it's effectively filtered by the Earth's ozone layer currently in 2020. So that's anything below 286 nanometers. For UVB, the type that we associate with solar energy, it is the cause of sunburn and snow blindness, and it gets absorbed by your cornea. So that's 286 to 320 nanometers. And then UVA is 320 nanometers to 400 nanometers. And that's that invisible spectrum that is particularly concerning for eye care. It is the most damaging of the types of UV radiation, and it's the radiation that tends to be transmitted to that lens of your eye that is crystalline in nature. Melanin is a natural protector against these types of substances. Higher amounts of melanin mean you are more protected against those damaging UV light rays. But folks also tend to lose melanin as we age. And by about age 65, roughly half of that protection is gone. And that's something else that can increase our susceptibility to these eye diseases like age-related macular degeneration. The blue rays on the spectrum also seem to accelerate AMD more than other rays on the spectrum, according to the Shepard's Eye Institute. Very bright lights like sunlight, or even the reflection of sunlight off of water, like in the ocean, or off of other substances, like in the desert, can worsen macular degeneration. So they recommend that you wear sunglasses that specifically protect against both blue/violet and UV light. So those orange dad sunglasses from the 90s aren't looking so silly now. Alright, my sunglasses do still make me look silly, but they are protecting my eyes as I age. A lot of different sunglass companies are also now including synthetic melanin in sunglasses, so that can help compensate for melanin that's lost as we age as humans. So with these types of sunglasses, those colors are filtered in proportion to their damage potential. So the more damaging that blue or violet light is, then the more it's filtered out. So a lot of optical shops that sell prescription eyewear have melanin lenses available now, and you can go online to check for those. All right, let's go ahead and go on another break. And when we come back, we're going to wrap up by talking about some ways to keep our eyes healthy. Stay tuned.
GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the UV spectrum, the types of light that are more harmful to your eyes, especially UVA and UVB. Now we're going to talk about some ways to keep our eyes healthy so we don't take them for granted. My uncle first got me really into eye health when I was probably about 20 years old. When he came back from the military, and he had been in the desert for a while, and was talking about just how bright the sunlight glinted off of the sand and the importance of wearing those sunglasses and protecting your eyes all the time. So he bought me my first pair of nice sunglasses that were meant to protect my eyes against snow blindness and also against the glare of the sun off of water or sand and so on. So that made me a lot more aware of it. And he also works in the healthcare industry. So it made me really start thinking a lot differently about something that I take for granted. Most of the time that I'm awake, my eyes are open. And for the most part, I have really good vision. I'm only minorly nearsighted, and I'm very privileged in that way. I'm used to just being able to open up my eyes and go about my business. And I really only need my glasses, which is a recent development in the past few years, when I go to look at things that are far away, really. So mostly when I go to drive. But like today, I forgot that I left my glasses in the house because I was the passenger in the car. And it wasn't until we got a few miles from the house that I realized I did not have my glasses with me. We didn't have to turn around and go get them because I can still get around fine without them. But not everyone is able to do that. And our risk for having eyesight issues gets worse as we age. So we're going to talk about some ways to keep our eyes healthy. And remember, today is a new day. If you are like me and took your eyesight for granted for a long time, you can start today with these easy steps to help keep them healthy. First up is to eat well. I love food, and you can help your eyes out by putting good food on your plate. So the specific nutrients that you are looking for are going to be those omega-3 fatty acids, lutein, vitamin C, E, and zinc. That can help ward off those age-related vision problems like macular degeneration that we discussed today. To get those, you can eat delicious food like salmon. I had some salmon sashimi this week, and it was fantastic. So get you some salmon or tuna or other oily fish. You can also have eggs, nuts, or beans, or other non-meat protein sources if you are not so into meat. You can also have oysters or pork or oranges, citrus fruits, juices. Remember, if you're going to have those juices though, to make sure that you are drinking them with fiber, because you want to slow down that digestive rate and give your body its best opportunity to create and absorb appropriate amounts of insulin. You can also get it from green leafy veggies like kale, collards, or spinach. I personally don't particularly love kale. I do love collards, but kale, not so much. So if I'm going to eat kale, I tend to cook it into being kale chips to get some of the bitterness out of it. Or I will go ahead and just blend up raw kale into like a chocolate shake with protein powder in it. That might sound kind of gross, but you don't really taste it. The chocolate ice cream and the vanilla protein powder kind of drown out the kale, and the blender / food processor gets it small enough that I can just swallow it. It's super, super small, so there's not a chance of choking or anything like that. And it's so small, I don't even need to chew it. So sometimes you can do that with spinach, you can do that with kale. If you are trying to get more of those greens in your life and you're not so excited about them, then you can also try that method if you like. Additionally, they recommend that you quit smoking because smoking can cause damage to your optic nerve, as well as increasing your risk of macular degeneration and cataracts. If you are having trouble smoking, go ahead and talk to your doctor for help. They might have some new options for you. You also want to wear those sunglasses, as we discussed earlier, and you want the kind that blocks 99 to 100% of UVA and UVB rays. If you get the wraparound lenses, that can also help protect your eyes from the side. Polarized lenses can also reduce the glare while you drive. If you wear contact lenses, some of them also offer UV protection. It's still a great idea to wear sunglasses for that extra layer of protection though. But I didn't know that before now about the contact lenses because I have never worn those. I'm eligible to, but I've just never tried it. So if you haven't been doing it for whatever reason, but you're interested in it now that you know it has UV protection, talk to your doctor about the specific types that have UV protection. You also want to wear that safety eyewear. So I like to do woodworking, you guys, and I like to make sure I'm staying safe. So whether I am sanding something and causing particulates to fly up in the air, or I'm using a power tool, or I am even just staining some wood, I don't want to splash that up into my eye either. So it's always a good idea to wear safety glasses or protective goggles. If you're playing sports like ice hockey or racquetball or lacrosse, those can all also lead to eye injury, and they recommend that you wear eye protection for it. If you have a helmet with a protective face mask or sports goggles with those polycarbonate lenses, those can also be extra helpful for shielding your eyes. Making sure that you are safe is the number one priority because you can't have fun in these activities if you get your eyes injured. So you want to make sure that you're not so worried about whether wearing a helmet makes you look silly or gives you helmet hair. It's more important that your eyes are safe. They also recommend that you look away from the computer screen. Now I know that's very difficult nowadays, y'all. Everything is on computer screens. Our phones are computer screens, our tablets, our books, our terminals in the airports that tell us which way to go. They're everywhere. All of our communication is primarily through these phone screens or these computer screens now, with email and chat and Slack and texting and everything else. So oftentimes we go home from work and we turn off the bad screen and then we turn on the good screen. We start watching Netflix or doing whatever it is our hobbies are that are on the computer. But staring at your phone or your computer screen for too long can result in dry eyes, headaches, neck, back, and shoulder pain, eye strain, blurry vision, and trouble focusing at a distance, which is one of the problems that I have from many years spent in dark labs, staring down microscopes, and also being on the computer so much. So to protect your eyes, you want to make sure that your glasses or your contacts are up to date with your prescription and that they are good for looking at a computer screen. This last time when I got my new glasses prescription, I also got that blue light filtering put onto mine too. So that helps out with my lenses. If you're still having eye strain afterwards, go talk to your doctor about computer glasses. If you're starting to have these headaches or this neck, back, and shoulder pain or any of the other symptoms that I mentioned, and it's been a while since you've updated your glasses or contacts prescription, you might want to talk to your doctor about getting another appointment to check your prescription and just getting an eye exam. That happened to me for a while. I was getting these terrible headaches and I just needed a new prescription. And these types of changes tend to happen so gradually that you don't really notice that they're an issue until they are a big issue. So until it's already causing you these symptoms. So put it on your calendar, or if you're experiencing these symptoms now, think about making an appointment with your doctor. You can also move your screen so your eyes are level with the top of the monitor. That helps you to look straight forward at your monitor rather than down. Now, if you can't just move your screen, I will teach you a pro tip from working in the tech industry. Stack some books under your computer. I do this a lot, especially when I am playing video games. Not only does it help you ergonomically with your neck and your shoulder and back posture, but it can also just make you look nicer during video meetings. So it can make you look taller. A lot of folks tell me that they think I am a lot taller before they meet me in real life. And part of that is just because of the positioning of my computer screen and putting things underneath it. Sometimes I stack it on top of my Scarlett, which I use for recording. Other times it's on top of a couple of old books. It just depends. One guy at my old job in the tech industry had actually just nailed 3 boards together. 1 long one and then 2 short ones to help up it to his height. And when he got promoted and I took over his job, he offered to let me keep it, but he was a good 8 inches or so taller than me. So that did not work for me. Then I was looking up too much instead of looking down, and that also hurt. So pay attention to where your screen is, and you can move it to feel better. You don't have to move the entire desk. Sometimes all it takes is a book or 2. But you don't have to take my word for it. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.